Daniel Cooper stood in chains. His wrists hurt from the metal pressing into his skin. Around him, other humans stood in the same way. Some of them were crying. Some of them were shaking with fear. But Daniel was not afraid. He was angry. The Great Hall of Noctara Prime was the largest room he had ever seen. Black stone walls rose up to a ceiling so high that it disappeared into darkness. Torches burned with purple fire along the walls, casting strange shadows that moved like living things. The air was cold, much colder than any place Daniel had been before. Vampires filled the hall. They sat in raised seats along both sides, watching the humans with hungry eyes. Their skin was pale as snow. Their eyes glowed red in the dim light. They wore clothes made of fine silk and dark velvet. Gold and silver jewelry hung from their necks and wrists. These were the nobles of the Eternal Dominion, the creatures who had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. And they were here to shop for humans. Daniel had heard stories about the royal breeding program his whole life. Every human in the Dominion knew about it. The vampires believed that by choosing which humans would have children together, they could create better blood. They wanted humans whose blood would make them stronger. They wanted humans whose blood would taste better. To them, humans were not people. Humans were animals to be raised and bred like cattle. For 200 years, humanity had lived under vampire rule. The war had ended long before Daniel was born. Humans had fought hard, but they had lost. Now most humans worked in mines and farms across the Dominion. They lived short, hard lives. They died young, and they had forgotten what it meant to be free. But Daniel was different. He was a smuggler. He had spent 15 years flying his small ship between planets, carrying things that the Dominion did not want carried. He had seen parts of the galaxy that most humans never saw. He had read old files, old records from before the conquest. He knew things that other humans had forgotten. That was why he was not afraid. A vampire in red robes walked to the center of the hall. He raised his hands for silence. The crowd of nobles grew quiet. "Welcome to the selection," the vampire said. His voice echoed through the great hall. "Today we have 47 humans for evaluation. Each one has been tested. Each one has been found to carry genetic markers of interest. You may begin your inspection." The nobles stood from their seats. They walked down to where the humans stood in chains. They moved slowly, studying each human like a farmer studying an animal at market. Some of them grabbed humans by the face and looked at their teeth. Some of them pulled back sleeves and studied the veins in human arms. One female vampire actually bit a young man and tasted his blood before spitting it out and moving on. Daniel watched all of this with cold eyes. He saw a young woman 3 spots down from him crying as a vampire noble squeezed her arm. He saw an old man trying to stand tall even though his legs were shaking. He saw children, some no older than 10 or 11, being inspected by creatures who would decide their entire futures. And something inside Daniel snapped. He thought about the files he had read. He thought about what humanity used to be before the conquest. He thought about the great ships they had built, the worlds they had settled, the wars they had fought against enemies far worse than vampires. He thought about the potential that still slept inside every human, waiting to be awakened. And he laughed. It started as a small sound, barely more than a chuckle. But it grew. It grew until it was a real laugh, loud and strong, filling the great hall like thunder. Every vampire in the room stopped what they were doing. Every human turned to stare at him. The nobles looked at Daniel with shock and anger on their pale faces. "What is this?" the vampire in red robes demanded. He walked toward Daniel with fury in his glowing eyes. "You dare to laugh here? You dare to show disrespect in the great hall of Noctara Prime?" Daniel could not stop laughing. He knew it was dangerous. He knew they might kill him for it. But he did not care. The whole thing was so absurd, so ridiculous, that he could not hold it in. "The breeding program," he said between laughs. "You have been running this program for 200 years, and you still do not understand." The vampire grabbed Daniel by the throat. His grip was like iron. "Understand what, human?" "You do not understand humans," Daniel said. "You do not understand why we are dangerous. You think you can breed us like horses. You think you can make us better by choosing who has children. But that is not how we work. That is not what makes us strong." The vampire squeezed harder. Daniel felt his breath getting shorter. But he kept talking. "Our strength comes from chaos, from randomness, from the things you cannot predict or control. You have been trying to make perfect humans for 200 years. But perfection is not what makes us dangerous." The vampire raised his other hand, claws extending from his fingers. He was about to tear Daniel's throat out. "Stop." The voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire hall. Every vampire froze. The noble holding Daniel let go and stepped back, bowing his head. A woman walked through the crowd. The other vampires moved aside like waves parting before a ship. She was tall and beautiful in a way that was almost painful to look at. Her hair was black as midnight. Her skin was pale as moonlight. Her eyes burned with a red fire that seemed to see everything. She wore a crown of black metal on her head. Queen Seraphina Valdris, ruler of the Eternal Dominion, stopped in front of Daniel. She reached out with one cold hand and lifted his chin, forcing him to meet her eyes. Daniel had faced death many times in his life as a smuggler. He had looked into the eyes of pirates, criminals, and killers. But he had never felt anything like what he felt when he looked into the eyes of the vampire queen. It was like looking into a fire that had been burning for 1,000 years. She studied him for a long moment. Her face showed nothing. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her lips. "This one," she said. "This one comes with me." She turned and walked toward the far end of the hall. 2 guards grabbed Daniel by the arms and dragged him after her. The other vampires watched in silence. The other humans stared with wide eyes. Daniel did not know what was going to happen next. He did not know if he would live or die. But as he was dragged through the great hall of Noctura Prime, following the most powerful vampire in the galaxy, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt hope. The awakening chamber was deep inside the mountain. The walls were made of smooth black stone that seemed to absorb light. Strange symbols were carved into the floor, forming a circle around a metal table in the center. Machines lined the walls, their screens showing data that moved too fast for Daniel to read. Lauren lay on the table. She wore a simple white gown. Her eyes were closed, but Daniel could see that she was breathing fast. She was scared, even though she tried not to show it. Seraphina stood at the edge of the circle. She had come to Erebus 7 to witness the first awakening herself. Her face was calm, but Daniel could see tension in her shoulders. This was the moment she had been working toward for decades. "Are you ready?" Seraphina asked. Lauren opened her eyes. "Yes." The scientists began their work. They injected Lauren with a clear liquid that Ashley called the activation serum. It contained genetic triggers designed to wake up the dormant sequences in her DNA. But the serum alone was not enough. Seraphina stepped into the circle. She raised her hands, and the symbols on the floor began to glow with red light. She spoke words in a language that Daniel had never heard before. The air grew heavy. The temperature dropped. This was the blood magic. Ancient techniques that vampires had used for thousands of years. Daniel did not understand how it worked. He did not need to understand. He just needed it to work. For a long moment, nothing happened. Lauren lay still on the table. The machines hummed. The symbols glowed. Then Lauren screamed. Her body lifted off the table. She floated in the air, her back arched, her eyes wide open. Light poured from her skin, not red like vampire magic, but golden like sunlight. The machines went crazy. Alarms blared. Scientists shouted to each other. Daniel stepped forward, wanting to help, but Nathan grabbed his arm and held him back. "There's nothing you can do," Nathan said. "It has to run its course." Lauren screamed again. Her body twisted in the air. The golden light grew brighter and brighter until Daniel had to shield his eyes. He could feel heat coming from her, heat like standing too close to a fire. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Lauren fell back onto the table. The light disappeared. The symbols stopped glowing. Everything was quiet. Ashley rushed forward with her scanner. Her hands were shaking as she checked the readings. Her face went pale. "It worked," she whispered. "It actually worked." Lauren opened her eyes. They were no longer brown. They glowed with soft golden light, like two small suns. "I can feel everything," Lauren said. Her voice was different somehow, deeper and stronger. "Every particle of air, every wave of energy. I can feel the heat from your bodies. I can feel the electricity in the machines. It is like I have been blind my whole life and can suddenly see." She sat up on the table. She moved differently now, more smoothly, like her body had become something more than human. She raised her hand and looked at it. Light flickered beneath her skin. "What am I?" she asked. "You are what humans were always meant to be," Serafina said. Her voice was filled with wonder. "The dormant code has awakened. Your body is now generating its own energy. You do not need to eat or breathe anymore. Your mind processes information 10 times faster than before. And there may be other abilities that we have not yet discovered." Lauren stood up from the table. She took a few steps, testing her new body. Then she stopped and looked at Daniel. "This is what you wanted to show me," she said. "This is what I could become." Daniel nodded. He felt tears in his eyes, though he did not know why. "This is what all humans could become," he said, "if we have the chance." Over the next few months, they awakened the others. Each awakening was different. Each human developed abilities that were unique to them. Some could control energy, bending heat and light to their will. One man named Kevin Park learned to create shields of pure force that could stop bullets and blades. A woman named Diana Reed could heal injuries by touching them, her hands glowing with golden light. Others developed mental powers. A young man named Victor Lane could read thoughts. An older woman named Grace Chun could see possible futures, glimpses of what might happen next. A teenager named Ethan Moore could move objects with his mind, lifting heavy things as easily as breathing. A few developed physical abilities that seemed impossible. A woman named Samantha Cruz could move faster than the eye could track, becoming a blur of motion. A man named Henry Adams became incredibly strong, able to bend metal with his bare hands. But the most amazing thing was not the individual powers. It was what happened when the awakened humans were together. They could link their minds. They could share thoughts and feelings and abilities across any distance. When they worked together, their powers multiplied. 10 awakened humans working as one were not just 10 times as strong. They were 100 times as strong. They called themselves the Emergent. Daniel watched them train in the underground chambers of Erebus 7. He watched them learn to use their powers, first alone and then together. He watched them become something that had never existed before in the history of the galaxy. And he felt hope growing in his chest. "We are ready," Lauren said one day. She had become the leader of the Emergent, respected by all the others for being the first to awaken. "We are ready to fight." But even as they prepared, the Purists were not idle. Lord Malakavorn was the leader of the Purist faction. He was old even by vampire standards, over 4,000 years old. He had fought in wars that most vampires had only read about. He had killed more humans than anyone could count, and he had learned about Erebus 7. Spies had reported strange activity on the hidden moon, ships coming and going, energy readings that did not make sense. Lord Malachar sent investigators. When they did not return, he sent soldiers. When they did not return either, he knew that something was very wrong. The Queen has betrayed us, he told his fellow purists. She has been hiding something on that moon, something that threatens everything we have built. He assembled a fleet, 300 warships crewed by thousands of vampire warriors, the largest military force that have been gathered in over a century. We will destroy whatever she has created, Lord Malachar said, and then we will destroy her. The fleet launched toward Erebus 7. On the hidden moon, alarms blared. Scientists ran through corridors. The emergent gathered in the main chamber, 47 awakened humans ready to defend their new home. Seraphina stood before them. Her face was grim. The purists have found us, she said. A fleet of 300 warships is coming. We cannot run. We cannot hide. We must fight. Daniel looked at the awakened humans around him. They were powerful, more powerful than anything the vampires had ever faced. But could they stand against 300 warships? Lauren stepped forward. Her golden eyes were calm. We are ready, she said. We are the emergent, and we will show the vampires what humans can really do. She reached out and took Daniel's hand. Then she reached out with her mind and connected with the others. Daniel felt it. Even though he was not awakened himself, he could feel the edges of their connection. 47 minds linked together. 47 sets of abilities combining into something greater than the sum of its parts. In that moment, he believed they could win. In that moment, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The guards took Daniel through long hallways made of black stone. They passed doors of dark wood and windows that looked out onto a purple sky. 2 moons hung above the horizon, one large and one small. Daniel had never seen this world before. He had only heard stories about Noctera Prime, the heart of the vampire empire. Finally, they reached a large door covered in golden patterns. The guards pushed Daniel inside and closed the door behind him. He heard locks clicking into place. Daniel looked around. He had expected a prison cell. Instead, he found himself in the most beautiful room he had ever seen. Crystal lamps hung from the ceiling, filling the space with soft white light. The floor was covered with thick red carpets. Furniture made of dark wood and red velvet filled the room. Through tall windows, he could see the city below, thousands of lights stretching out to the horizon. Queen Seraphina stood by one of the windows, looking out at her kingdom. She did not turn around when Daniel entered. Do you know why I brought you here? She asked. Daniel thought about lying. He thought about playing dumb. But something told him that this was not the time for games. Because I laughed, he said. Seraphina turned to face him. Her red eyes studied him with interest. Yes, because you laughed. She walked toward him slowly, her black dress moving like water. In 2,000 years of the breeding program, no human has ever laughed. They have begged. They have screamed. They have cursed us in their dying breaths, but never laughed. Maybe they did not see the joke, Daniel said. And what joke is that? Daniel took a deep breath. He knew that what he said next could save his life or end it. The breeding program does not work, he said. It has never worked. You have been trying to improve human blood for 200 years, but you do not understand human genetics. Seraphina raised one eyebrow. Go on. Humans are not like other species, Daniel continued. You cannot breed us for specific traits. Our genes do not work that way. Every time 2 humans have a child, the result is unpredictable. Traits mix in random ways. New combinations appear that no one expected. That is how humans evolved. That is what makes us different from every other species in the galaxy. He paused, gathering his thoughts. You have been trying to create perfect humans. But perfection is not what makes us strong. Our strength comes from change, from adaptation, from becoming something new with every generation. By trying to control our breeding, you have been working against the very thing that makes human blood valuable. Serafina was silent for a long moment. Her face showed nothing of what she was thinking. Daniel felt sweat forming on his forehead. He had just told the Queen of the Vampires that her entire program was a failure. She could kill him with one hand. Then she laughed odd. It was not a cruel laugh or a mocking laugh. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes from genuine surprise and delight. Finally, she said, after all these years, finally a human who understands. She walked to a wall covered in red fabric. She pressed her hand against a hidden panel, and the wall slid open. Behind it was another room, much smaller than the first, but filled with strange equipment. Holographic screens floated in the air, showing images of DNA and star maps. Machines hummed quietly in the corners. Come, Serafina said. I want to show you something. Daniel followed her into the hidden room. His chains had been removed at some point, he realized. He had not even noticed. The breeding program is a lie, Serafina said. She waved her hand, and the holographic screens changed. They showed images of vampire nobles sitting in their fine chairs, arguing with each other. A performance for the noble houses. Something to keep them busy while I work on more important things. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Serafina turned to face him. For the first time, he saw something in her eyes that looked almost human. It looked like hope. I do not want to breed humans for blood, she said. I want to save them. Daniel felt his heart stop. He must have heard wrong. The Queen of the Vampires wanted to save humans? I do not understand, he said. Serafina walked to one of the holographic screens. She pulled up an image of human DNA, the double helix spinning slowly in the air. Your species is special, Daniel Cooper. More special than you know. She pointed at certain sections of the DNA image. See these sequences? They are dormant, inactive. They have been sleeping in human genes for millions of years. What are they? We do not know exactly. Our scientists believe that long ago, your ancestors encountered something. Some kind of event that changed them at the genetic level. It could have been an alien contact. It could have been a cosmic phenomenon. Whatever it was, it left traces in your DNA. Code that has never been activated. Daniel stared at the spinning image. What would happen if it was activated? Serafina smiled. Then humans would become something new, something powerful, something that could stand as equals to vampires. Maybe even more than equals. She waved her hand again, and the screen showed images of vampires in military uniforms. Their faces were hard and cruel. But there are those who do not want this to happen, she said. The purists. They believe that vampires should remain supreme forever. They believe that all other species should exist only to serve us. And they have learned about the dormant code in human DNA. What are they planning? Daniel asked. He felt cold fear spreading through his chest. They are building a weapon. A genetic weapon that will rewrite human DNA and destroy the dormant sequences forever. They call it the Purge Protocol. Seraphine's voice was heavy with anger. If they succeed, humanity will be reduced to nothing more than livestock. All that potential, all that possibility, will be erased. Daniel felt sick. His whole life, he had thought that humans were already at the bottom. He had thought that things could not get worse. But now he understood that the vampires could take even more from his species. They could take their future. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Why would you want to help humans? Serafina was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. Because I have lived for 3,000 years, Daniel. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have watched species be born and go extinct. And I have learned one truth that the purists refuse to accept. She looked at him with those ancient red eyes. Nothing lasts forever. Not even vampires. If we do not change, if we do not evolve, we will die. Slowly, perhaps over thousands of years, but we will die. The purists want to keep things the way they are. But I know that survival requires growth. It requires change. She placed a cold hand on his shoulder. Humans are the key to our survival. Not as cattle, not as blood slaves, but as partners. Your species has something mine lacks. The ability to become something new. The ability to adapt and change and grow. If we can awaken the dormant code in humans, if we can help you become what you were meant to be, then perhaps both our species can have a future. Daniel felt his mind spinning. Everything he had believed about vampires, everything he had been taught, was being turned upside down. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Sarafina smiled. It was a real smile, warm and almost human. "I need you to help me find others like you. Humans with strong dormant code. Humans who can be awakened. I need you to help me build an army." She offered him her hand. "Will you help me save your species, Daniel Cooper?" Daniel looked at her hand. He thought about everything she had told him. He thought about the danger, the risk, the possibility that this was all a trick. Then he thought about his people. He thought about the humans in the mines and the farms. He thought about the children being sold at auction. He thought about what humanity could become if they had a chance. He took her hand. "Yes," he said. "I will." 3 months passed. Daniel learned more about the vampire empire in those months than he had learned in his whole life before. Sarafina explained everything to him. She told him about the Shadow War that had been fought for centuries, hidden from ordinary vampires and humans. The Dominion was divided into 2 groups. The purists wanted to keep things the way they were, with vampires on top and everyone else below. The reformists, led by Sarafina, believed that change was necessary for survival. The purists were stronger. They controlled most of the military. They controlled most of the noble houses. If Sarafina moved openly against them, she would be destroyed. So she had to work in secret. She introduced Daniel to his team. Nathan Brooks was a big man with gray hair and hard eyes. 20 years ago, he had led a rebellion against the vampires on a planet called Cronus 7. The rebellion had failed. Most of his people had died. Nathan had been captured and sentenced to work in the mines until he died. But Sarafina had found him and saved him. "I have been waiting for another chance," Nathan told Daniel. "A chance to fight back. A chance to make my people's deaths mean something." Ashley Brennan was younger, maybe 30 years old. She had worked as a scientist assistant in a vampire laboratory. She was brilliant with genetics, able to understand things that took other scientists years to learn. But because she was human, she had never been allowed to do her own research. She had been forced to clean equipment and carry samples while vampires took credit for her ideas. "I know more about human DNA than anyone in the Dominion," Ashley said. Her voice was quiet but confident. "When I heard about the dormant sequences, I knew that everything I had suspected was true. Humans are not just cattle. We are something special." Connor Walsh was the youngest of the group, barely 25. He was a pilot, one of the best Daniel had ever seen. He could fly through asteroid fields and escape Dominion patrols with moves that seemed impossible. He had been born on a transport ship and had learned to fly before he could walk. "Give me a ship and a destination," Connor said with a grin, "and I will get you there, fast." Together, the 4 of them formed a team. Their mission was simple but dangerous. They had to travel across the Dominion, finding humans with strong dormant code. They had to bring those humans to a hidden base on a moon called Erebus 7. There, Seraphine's loyal scientists would try to awaken the dormant sequences, but first, they needed to understand what they were looking for. Ashley spent weeks studying the data that Seraphina had gathered. She found patterns in the dormant code, markers that showed which humans had the strongest potential. She created a device that could scan humans and identify those markers in seconds. "The code is not in everyone," Ashley explained one night, as the team gathered in their small ship. Or rather, it is in everyone, but in different amounts. Some humans have very little. Others have a lot. We are looking for the ones with the most. How many are there? Daniel asked. In the whole Dominion? Maybe a few thousand. Finding them will not be easy. They are scattered everywhere, in mines and farms and breeding centers. We will have to search carefully. Their first mission took them to a labor colony on the edge of the Empire. It was a small planet with red dust and thin air. Humans worked there mining crystals that vampires used for their technology. Daniel and his team landed their ship in a hidden valley. They walked into the mining town disguised as traders. Ashley carried her scanning device hidden in her bag. The town was sad and gray. The buildings were made of cheap metal. The streets were covered in red dust. Humans walked with bent backs and tired eyes. Most of them would die before they reached 40, worn out by the hard work and the thin air. Daniel felt anger burning in his chest. This was what his people had become. Slaves working themselves to death for creatures who saw them as nothing more than tools. They spent 2 days in the town, scanning every human they could get close to. Most of them had very little dormant code. But on the second day, Ashley grabbed Daniel's arm. "There," she whispered. "That woman by the water pump." Daniel looked. He saw a woman in her 30s, thin and tired like all the others. Her clothes were worn. Her hair was covered in dust. But when Ashley showed him the scanner, the readings were off the charts. Her name was Lauren Vance. She had been born in the mines and had worked there her whole life. She had never left the planet. She had no idea that she was special. They approached her carefully, pretending to be travelers who needed water. Daniel talked to her while Ashley confirmed the readings. "Would you like to leave this place?" Daniel asked quietly. "Would you like a chance at a better life?" Lauren looked at him with suspicious eyes. "There is no better life for people like us." "There could be. If you come with us." It took time to convince her. Lauren did not trust strangers, and she had good reason not to. But Daniel told her about the dormant code, about what it could mean for her and for all humans. He told her about Seraphina and her plan. In the end, Lauren agreed to come. She had nothing to lose. They smuggled her off the planet that night. It was the first of many rescues. Over the next 6 months, Daniel and his team traveled to dozens of worlds. They found humans in mines and factories, in breeding centers and noble houses. Some came willingly. Others needed convincing. A few refused entirely, too afraid or too broken to believe that things could change. The purists began to notice. Someone was moving through the Empire, taking valuable humans. They sent investigators. They increased security. Twice, Daniel and his team barely escaped with their lives, but they kept going. By the time they reached Erebus 7 with their final group, they had gathered 47 humans with strong, dormant code. The hidden base was built inside, a mountain on the moon's dark side. Seraphine's loyal scientists had been working there for years, preparing for this moment. They had equipment that Daniel did not understand. Machines that combined vampire technology with something older, something that looked almost magical. "We use blood rituals," one of the scientists explained. "Ancient techniques that our kind learned thousands of years ago. Combined with modern genetic engineering, we believe we can activate the dormant sequences." The first awakening was scheduled for the next morning. Lauren Vance had volunteered to go first. That night, Daniel could not sleep. He walked through the corridors of the hidden base, thinking about everything that had happened. 6 months ago, he had been a smuggler with no purpose. Now he was part of something bigger than himself. Something that could change the future of his entire species. He found Lauren sitting by a window, looking out at the stars. "Are you scared?" he asked Dot. She was quiet for a moment. "Yes, but I am also excited. My whole life, I have felt like there was something more inside me. Something waiting to come out. Maybe this is what I have been waiting for." Daniel sat down beside her. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that you are brave. Braver than most people I have ever known." Lauren smiled. It was the first real smile Daniel had seen from her since they had met. "If this works," she said, "what will we become?" Daniel looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the purists were building their weapon. Somewhere out there, the future of humanity was hanging in the balance. "Something new," he said. "Something the vampires have never seen before. Something that will make them understand that humans are not just food. We are so much more." Lauren nodded. They sat together in silence, watching the stars and waiting for morning. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Purist fleet came out of hyperspace like a storm of iron and fire. 300 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one crewed by vampire warriors who had been killing for centuries. They surrounded Erebus 7, blocking any path of escape. Lord Malachar Vorn stood on the bridge of his flagship. His ancient eyes looked at the small moon with contempt. "Destroy it," he ordered. "Leave nothing alive." The warships opened fire. Missiles and energy beams shrieked toward the surface of Erebus 7. Enough firepower to crack the moon in half. But the attacks never landed. A wall of golden light appeared in space, stretching across the entire dark side of the moon. The missiles exploded against it. The energy beams scattered into nothing. The vampires watched in shock as their most powerful weapons did no damage at all. "What is this?" Lord Malachar demanded. "What magic is this?" On the surface of Erebus 7, the Emergents stood in a circle. Their hands were linked. Their minds were connected. And their power flowed together into a single shield that protected everything behind it. Lauren stood at the center of the circle. Her body glowed with golden light. She was the focus point, the anchor that held all the others together. "Hold steady," she said through their mental connection. "They cannot break through as long as we stand together." But the shield was only the beginning. The Emergent reached out with their combined power. They did not attack the ships. Instead, they reached into the minds of the vampires inside them. Vampires were old and powerful. Their minds were strong, hardened by centuries of experience. But the Emergent were something new, something the vampires had never faced before. And when 47 awakened minds worked as one, they could do things that should have been impossible. They showed the vampires the truth. Every vampire in the fleet suddenly saw the same vision. They saw the history of the Dominion, the wars and the conquests, the species that had been enslaved and destroyed. They saw the stagnation that came after, the slow decay that was eating away at their civilization. They saw a future where vampires had no new ideas, no new growth, no new life. And then they saw another future. A future where vampires and humans worked together. A future where the dormant code was awakened in all humans, where new powers and new abilities brought new possibilities. A future where both species grew stronger by helping each other. It was not a command. It was not a demand. It was simply the truth, shown clearly and without deception. On the bridge of his flagship, Lord Malachar fell to his knees. He had lived for 4,000 years. He had seen more than most creatures could imagine. But he had never seen anything like this. What have we done? He whispered. What have we been doing all these years? Some vampires rejected the vision. Their minds were too hard, their beliefs too fixed. They tried to keep fighting, tried to keep shooting at the golden shield. But they were fewer than expected. Most of the vampires, especially the younger ones, were shaken by what they had seen. The battle turned into chaos. Ships began to pull back. Crews argued with each other. Some vampires attacked their own commanders, who refused to stop fighting. In the end, less than 50 ships continued the assault. The rest either retreated or simply stopped fighting. The Emergent dealt with the remaining ships quickly. Victor Lane reached into the minds of the hostile crews and made them sleep. Diana Reed projected her healing energy across space, knocking vampires unconscious without killing them. Kevin Park created force fields inside the ships, trapping warriors in their own corridors. Within an hour, it was over. Lord Malachor was brought to Erebus 7 in chains. His fleet was scattered. His army was defeated. The most powerful military force in the Dominion had been broken by 47. Awakened humans. Queen Seraphina met him in the main chamber of the hidden base. She looked at her old enemy with a mix of pity and anger. You spent so many years trying to keep things the same, she said. You were so afraid of change that you could not see that change was the only way to survive. Lord Malachor looked up at her. For the first time in his long life, he looked truly old. What will you do now? He asked. We will build a new dominion, Seraphina said. One where vampires and humans are partners, not masters and slaves. It will take time. It will not be easy. But it is the only future worth having. She turned to the awakened humans standing behind her. These are the Emergent, she said. The first of a new kind of human. They are proof that your breeding program was based on a lie. Humans were never meant to be perfected. They were meant to evolve, to change, to become something greater. Lord Malachor bowed his head. He had no answer. Everything he had believed for 4,000 years had been proven wrong. The news spread across the Dominion like wildfire. The Purist fleet had been defeated. Lord Malachor had been captured. The Queen had revealed her true alliance with a new group called the Emergent. Some vampires celebrated. The Reformists had been waiting for this moment for centuries. They came out of hiding and declared their support for Seraphina and her new vision. Other vampires were angry and afraid. They tried to organize resistance, tried to continue the Purist cause. But without Lord Malachor and without his fleet, they had no power. One by one, they were defeated or convinced to surrender. The transition was not smooth. There were fights and arguments and difficult negotiations. Some vampires could not accept the new order and had to be imprisoned. Some humans did not trust the vampires and refused to work with them. But slowly, piece by piece, a new dominion began to take shape. Daniel Cooper watched it all happen. He had started as a simple smuggler, a man with no purpose beyond survival. Now he was a hero, one of the founders of the Emergent movement. But he did not feel like a hero. He felt tired. One evening, Seraphina found him standing on a balcony, overlooking the capital city of Noctera Prime. The twin moons hung in the purple sky. Just as they had on the night, he had been brought to her chambers in chains. You look troubled, she said. Daniel shrugged. I keep thinking about everything that happened. All the lives that were lost. All the suffering that could have been prevented if things had been different. Seraphina nodded. I have lived for 3,000 years. I have seen more suffering than you can imagine. And I have learned that the past cannot be changed. We can only shape the future. She stood beside him, looking out at the city. You were right to laugh, she said. That day in the Great Hall, when everyone else was afraid, you laughed. Do you know why that mattered? Daniel shook his head. Because laughter is a form of rebellion, Seraphina said. It is a way of saying that you refuse to be controlled, refuse to be broken, refuse to accept that things cannot change. Your laugh was the first crack in the wall that the purists had built. Everything that followed came from that moment. Daniel thought about her words. He thought about Lauren and the other emergent. He thought about all the humans who would be awakened in the years to come. What happens now? He asked. Now we do the hard work, Serafina said. Building a new society is not as exciting as fighting a war. There will be setbacks and disappointments. There will be times when you want to give up. But as long as we keep moving forward, as long as we keep trying, we have a chance. She turned to face him. Her ancient eyes were warm. Thank you, Daniel Cooper. For everything. Daniel smiled. I guess humans are good for more than just blood after all. Serafina laughed. It was a real laugh, full and genuine, echoing across the balcony. Yes, she agreed. Much more. 50 years later, Daniel stood on the porch of his home on a distant planet. He was old now, his hair gray and his face lined with age. But his eyes were still sharp, and his mind was still clear. The planet was called New Beginning. It was one of the first joint colonies, where vampires and awakened humans lived together as equals. From his porch, Daniel could see the settlement below, a mix of vampire architecture and human design. Children played in the streets, some with pale skin and red eyes, others with golden light flickering beneath their skin. His daughter Sophia sat beside him. She had been born awakened, part of the second generation of emergent. Her powers were stronger than any of the first generation. She could move mountains with her mind and see futures that stretched across centuries. Tell me the story again, she said, about how it all started. Daniel smiled. It was a request she had made many times before. It started with a laugh, he said. I was in chains in the great hall of Noctera Prime. Vampires were examining humans like we were cattle. And I laughed, because I knew a secret that they did not know. What secret? That humans were not weak. We were not cattle. We were not meant to be controlled. Inside every human was the potential to become something amazing. Something that could stand beside vampires as equals, or even surpass them. All we needed was a chance. Sophia leaned against his shoulder, and the vampire queen gave us that chance. She did. She saw what others could not see. She believed in humans when no one else did. And together, we changed the galaxy. They sat in silence, watching the sun set over New Beginning. The sky turned from blue to orange to purple, colors that reminded Daniel of his first night on Noctera Prime so many years ago. Dad, Sophia said, do you ever regret it? Any of it? Daniel thought about the question. He thought about the dangers he had faced, the friends he had lost, the long years of struggle and sacrifice.